Exchange. I'm joined by Brido and delighted first of all to be here on Acsom's Charity Weekender. I think this is potentially the third time we've been on, and always delighted to support Paul, John and the team and all the good work they're doing. This year you'll have seen the aim is to support young Jamie Tierney, and he's needing ongoing support in his battle against Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So a big thanks to everyone who's already donated across the weekend. There's still a chance to do so. You'll see the links in the show notes as well. So, Brido, great to have you on here. First of all, how are you feeling in general before we get into what we're going to talk about today?
Great to be here for this cause, that's for sure. It's a great cause and everybody involved. But it's how I feel about Celtic right now. I wouldn't have said great, mate. I wouldn't say great at all.
Yeah. What we're going to do, so just to explain our format, so everyone's had the various hours across the weekend. Some have talked about what's going on at Celtic, and rightly so. It's not great at this moment in time. We didn't want to come on and do more of that because I'm sure everyone's had enough of that for the weekend, and it's quite a negative place to be at the moment. So to put a bit of a spin on it, what we're going to do is I've asked Brido the question, who would be the three players from Celtic's past that you would include in the current 11 to try and get us out of this current situation? It'd be very easy and very lazy just to run through the whole 11 and say I'd go him in goals, him centre half, blah, blah, blah. So you can only replace three, Brido. So I suppose to help us with that, first of all, what would you say are the three key areas that Celtic need to address? Is it too easy and too lazy to say goalie, left back, striker? That's the chat that's been doing the rounds recently.
Yeah, I mean, I put the question to family and friends and stuff as well to get a bit of feel for what the appetite for certain replacements and, you know, favourite players and things like that. And you're probably right. The kind of common theme was goalkeeper, left back, and striker a lot. I've actually stayed away from like putting like Larsson and stuff in because it's just too easy to do that. I think you would just say Larsson and then you wouldn't need to talk about it after that. In fact, I actually think if you put Larsson in on his own, would be absolutely fine. So no, I actually didn't. I went for a goalkeeper, a left back, and a kind of a different type of midfielder as to what we've got. And I think speaking to a lot of fans, one type of midfielder that a lot of fans have kind of for a good wee while now are saying that's what we need, particularly in Europe, in fact.
Yeah. So what we've done, we put the question out earlier this afternoon on Twitter. Got a few different responses, but you're quite right. It's easy to say Larsson, and I get that. So we're trying to move away from that school of thought. I mean, there's one thing having Henrik Larsson, though. If you can't get the ball to him, if your wingers aren't getting to the byline and putting it in, does it matter if you've got Larsson there? That's another question. But various folk have replied. So Goose1167 on Twitter, he's gone for Lubo, Larsson, Sutton. Hard to argue with those calibre of players. Holmesy, he's gone Boric, Tierney, Brown. Scooby, Boric, Tom Boyd, interesting. Lubo Moravchik. And Cuz has gone Mjallby, Brown, Larsson. All big players, all key players for Celtic at different times. We've then got Francis McDonald. Brido, I think he's taken us a bit less seriously. He's gone for Barkas, Tony Cascarino, and present-day Jim Craig, aged 80. And Paul Massey, he's gone Lee Naylor, Paddy McCourt, and Colin Kazim Richards. So any thoughts on any of the guys mentioned there?
I think the last 6 players for the last 2 guys there was at the minute. I think Rodgers might fling them in as well, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, there's absolute legends mentioned there, and there's probably another 100 more that we could mention over the last few decades. I've kind of chosen players actually that we could probably realistically afford a player of that type and quality, as opposed to, you know, I think I used to do that quite a lot, didn't we? We'd like look at like so Lubo, what would he cost now? You know, like it's just an argument or a debate that you could never come to an end of with. So yeah, but there's some absolute legends in there. And I mean, you say those players' names, it's particularly like Mjallby and Larsson and Sutton and Lubo. I just feel like it's football in general is quite different, but it's like a different stratosphere at the minute. I think watching Celtic, unfortunately, I don't like to say that, but that's exactly what it is. It's not anywhere near that level, and maybe that's what Derek Adams, Ross County, when he's alluding to about the level of the game right now. Does he have a valid point or not? Maybe he does, but it's our game, it's what we've got, and we've got to, and it's our club, and therefore we've got to try our best with what we've got. I think we could have a lot better though, and we could be doing a lot better with the players we've got.
We definitely could, and we had the debate. So myself and Acsom done our post-match show yesterday, and we were talking about, who's to blame? Is it the recruitment team at this moment in time? Is it Rodgers? Is it the players? It's definitely a bit of all three if you want to look at those key areas. And frustrating as the summer transfer window was, Brendan Rodgers and a guy of his talent, and listen, I'm a fan. I know you're a fan. Some guys aren't, and that's fine as well. But a manager or a coach of his calibre should be getting more out of the players he's got. I know there's a lack of quality in certain areas. You can certainly debate, should James Forrest and Mikey Johnson be Celtic wingers in 2023, all that kind of stuff. Is Greg Taylor out his depth? Various things like that. But also, amongst that, there's various players amongst this squad who have proven themselves as winners. Some of them, quite a lot of them, have won trebles. And he should be getting more out of the individuals that he's got, even though some are limited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, as a manager, we've seen it with Ange. He got a tune out of players that we didn't think. We thought they had a lower ceiling than they did. There would be a counter argument with that, that Rodgers is getting a lot more out of Scales than other managers or Ange did. He's certainly playing better than I thought, or certainly playing more than we thought he was going to play. But you're right. I think, especially in the kind of attacking area, I think we're so lacking in it, and it's just, I find it hard. You're saying that the allocation of blame, if you like. I put kind of Rodgers 25%, the players 25%, and then the people that put them there 50%. Now that could change from day to day depending on the things that happen. But the reason I did that is because the board ultimately they picked Rodgers, so and they're essentially given the checkbook at a certain level for certain players. But yeah, I didn't mind James Forrest signing an extra year's contract because as a squad player, reliable, good to come on in games against St Johnstone, St Mirren, that type of thing. Knew they won a lot of trophies. But I do have a problem with players that, like Mikey Johnson and stuff, playing. It just doesn't. We've all tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, and other players, but at what cost? It's just not good enough. The level's just not there.
You've mentioned, Bridle, that we're lacking in attacking intent, and I've got to agree. And I suppose that's signified absolutely by the fact that Kyogo, the main man, 34 goals last season, is just not ticking. He got 34 goals in 50 games last year. I think he's currently got 8 goals in 25 games this year. So he's played half the games. He's definitely not got half the goals. And it does highlight the fact that Celtic just aren't firing in an attacking sense. So to get us kick-started with some of the players that we're going to look at, what area, what position specifically would you like to see a change in? Is it a number 10? Is it a creative type? Is it a better winger? Is it a different centre forward to Kyogo? What one position at this moment in time do you think Celtic really need to prioritise in an attacking sense?
I think it has to be the third midfielder. It has to be the third midfielder. Celtic have been so successful having 3 players in that, and maybe 1 or 2 changing now and again, but more often than not, it was Brown, McGregor, and Roderick or Armstrong or whatever, and a few others thrown in now and again. We've seen it, under different managers, different Celtic teams. The midfield was fairly set in stone because the players were of a certain level. And okay, there'd be other players coming in. We're not at that stage. We're still at a stage of using, I would say, fringe players or players that shouldn't be there as your main players in that position. And it doesn't make any sense either because we're seeing ones not featuring at all in games, big games, and then starting the next game. It just doesn't make any sense at the minute. And that's on Rodgers. That's 100% on Rodgers because you'll not get consistency if we keep on picking different players every 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, what I've said in general, inconsistent lineups equals inconsistent results, and that's exactly what we're getting. And there's a bizarre thing going on where, when it comes to Europe, we generally seem to have gone for Paulo Bernardo. Can't get a game domestically, barely features domestically, but we'll throw him in for Feyenoords and Atleticos and Lazios and all that stuff, and then you don't see him for another while. And I don't know what happens now. We're out of Europe, so does that mean he can just down tools and relax to lend his loan spell? I don't know. But Brendan Rodgers has seriously struggled to replace Rio Hatate, and it's not an easy thing to do. I think Rio's one of the most talented guys at Celtic. I know he didn't quite start the season as you'd hope, and Turnbull was in for him. I think that was just to give him a rocket. I think that was Brendan's man management, trying to get the best out of him. He then comes back into the team and was very unfortunate to pick up, I think it's the hamstring injury against Atletico at home. But since then, you've seen Bernardo, you've seen bits of Thiago home, but he's very quickly become the forgotten man. You've seen a fair bit of David Turnbull, but it's never really worked. He's scored some goals, he's hit some penalties, but it's not really kick-started for him. And the guy that I was excited about was Tomoki Iwata. He came in recent weeks there, looked like he was going to, first of all, come in and do his job in the number 6, but free up Callum McGregor to move further forward. He's now picked up the injury, and you have to say, in defence of Brendan Rodgers, he has had bad luck with injuries. There's no getting away from that, but not to excuse some of the other stuff. But Tomoki Iwata now finds himself out, and Celtic have got that headache all over again. I'd really have no idea who he'd play on Saturday. We've got Livingston at home on Saturday, one of the last games before the break. And at this moment in time, you can toss a coin over who that's going to be. But for the purposes of this exercise and for a bit of fun, going back into the archives, going back into Celtic's history, who would you like to see there? Who would you like to be that third midfielder?
It's Victor Wanyama. I mean, you could pick, Brown and all the rest of it, but Wanyama for me is just, he wasn't here for a crazy long period, but I just feel like that's the type of player that we need, and we've been missing for a long time. Probably partly because Callum's been playing so much and he's not that type of player. But we could quite easily, similar to what you're saying about Iwata, I think, putting Wanyama in there and Callum can then move forward, then that would really help the team as well. But that's the type of player. And I've never really seen anybody doing it anywhere near as good as him for a long, long time.
Yeah, there's definitely a need for physicality in this Celtic side. Brendan Rodgers has said that he needs quality and he needs physicality. It's not to go back to a different era of football in terms of Martin O'Neill's team of the early 2000s, but one thing he did have was big guys, big powerful guys. Mialbi, I know the guys they're speaking to tomorrow at Gracie's, but Mialbi, Bobo Balde, Sutton, Hartson, big powerful athletes, big physical specimens. And I think you do need an element of that on your side. You don't want to go out and be a team of hammer throwers, do you? But you want to have guys that can go and make sure you win that physical battle, which then frees up your creative types to go and do what they do. So if you've got a Wanyama or somebody sitting in your number 6 and just patrolling that area, cutting out all the attacks and then releasing it to O'Reilly's and McGregor's and Kyogo's or whatever, you're going to be in a far better position, generally speaking, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's on the ball, because Celtic have a lot of it domestically. On the ball, you need to be composed, strong, and able to, like you said, offload it to the players who are technically better at other aspects of the game. But it's off the ball. We are so exposed, and it's just becoming too easy to get through our team at the minute. One loose pass, and it seems to be, even although, so we're not the Ange Celtic team, which was, missiles flying everywhere, gung-ho type a lot of the time. And it left us open, but we completely understood and respected that because we were attacking so much. We shouldn't be this exposed playing under Rodgers' style, because it is very much meant to be controlled possession. And if we do lose it, we're not caught out, so we don't concede as many, or shouldn't concede as many goals. It's just not happening. It seems to be quite easy for teams to sit and then when they break, we look in real trouble. The Kilmarnock game is a perfect example of that second goal. Like, the runner just right through the heart of our team to tuck it past the goalkeeper. So for me, it needs somebody who that is their job. Callum's job is to do more than that, and he does it well. But McGregor's the type of player who players around him playing well for most of the time. I think guys like Wanyama can do things like that on their own, or that type of player. If everybody else is not having a good game, if their game is solely on that aspect, then it's up to them, and pretty much nobody else can influence that.
Yeah, there's a real vulnerability, through the middle at Celtic at this moment in time. You're absolutely right. Was it the boy? Is it Daniel Henderson? Is that the winger for Kilmarnock? I think he ran about 40, 50 yards before somebody even engaged with him. I thought Liam Scales was short and getting him, but there was no midfield to speak of. He just had the freedom of Rugby Park to go and do his thing before he had to then make a decision. He's played in your man, Matty Kennedy, and it's 2-1, it's all over. You've picked Wanyama as your guy for that. I mean, it's clear that Celtic, at least under Ange and maybe beyond, identified that as a position they wanted to strengthen. You'll know the various guys that he brought in to try and do that role. James McCarthy, that has not worked out. Yusuke Edeguchi still at the club, but out on loan. Oliver Abelgard brought him in on loan temporarily from, was it Ruben Kazan? He's now gone. Tomoki Iwata might be the guy. I hope he's the guy, but it remains to be seen. And I think there's a few that I might have missed there as well. So it's clear that the club have identified that as somewhere they want to strengthen. But despite, doing the rounds and going shopping every other summer or January, we still find ourselves weak in that area. There's no doubt that it's a position that we've not yet filled. And I'd like to think and hope the club are keen to address that. I'd love it to be January, but you never know what happens in that kind of window, but it's got to be by the summer latest. You picked Wanyama, Bridal, which I don't think a lot of folk would argue with that. A big player for Celtic, got one of the big goals against Barca in that win in 2012. There's other guys that might be up for that role. Neil Lennon, not everybody's cup of tea these days. I like him. I think he deserves his place. But Neil Lennon, Paul Lambert, maybe a Petrov type or even a peak Scott Brown. Any of the rest of them guys that you might like to see in the role?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Petrov was one of my favourite players, and probably the same as a lot of fans. It's just more Petrov was box to box. He was probably the best player of running beyond the striker. We didn't really have that until Armstrong came in, and then when Armstrong left under Lennon, all our players wanted the ball cut back or at the edge of the box. We didn't penetrate, and that's why we eventually didn't get the trophies we needed. Everybody wanted the ball cut back, with the exception of like Lee Griffiths, who's a striker, would be in the box. Edward wanted it cut back. Christie, Rogic, McGregor, Brown, all of them wanted the ball played back towards them as opposed to bombing forward past the striker, making space. So under Ange, that was different. We've got midfielders that are scoring goals, Matt O'Reilly being one of them. But yeah, Petrov, that was his biggest attribute, was for me anyway, was that. And he's getting a good number of goals. Wanyama, for me, is because it's slightly different. That's just a slightly different type of role. But Lennon was tremendous. Lambert was, again, just a great signing at a great time. We needed it. Again, came up with some big moments. So we've been lucky. We've been lucky for a long number of years to have all those players in that we can recall. But right now, I feel like, yeah, O'Reilly, if he's not on it, becomes a bit of a luxury. He's not going to dig in and win you lots of tackles. McGregor, I think, is a tremendous footballer, but has he got that physicality? No, I don't think he does. Nor would I want him to try and be like that. I'd want him to be the best with the attributes he's got, as opposed to trying to change his game. So it needs somebody in there to help them do that and primarily do that job. And I just think it's been crying out for that for a long time. I think we've got Kwon in the squad, and it's just this constant, let's take a chance on this guy. It's such an important role for me. I think it's, so why are we taking chances on prospects? We've done that often enough. It's time to look and get a proper player in that position.
Yeah, it is a bit of a specialist role, isn't it? It's not it's not just a run of the mill. Oh, you play midfield, I'll put you in the number 6 then. And the thing is, Callum McGregor certainly didn't start life at Celtic as that kind of player. I actually think initially he played out off the right wing for Celtic, didn't he? And he would cut in on his left. Then he became this more advanced midfielder. Then at times he sat a bit deeper with Bruni. And then when Bruni departs, they've just slotted him in there. He's done a brilliant job for Celtic in the 6, generally speaking. I would argue that it's not his best position. I remember just a few weeks ago, Neil Lennon was speaking and said it's a bit of a waste that he's there because he's got so much to offer further forward and more creatively. It's important that we've got a bit of strength there, throughout your spine, throughout the middle. But it's not to say you want a hatchet man as such, someone just to go and wipe guys out and pick up yellow cards, indiscriminately. But you do want someone who's got a wee bit of kind of streetwise stuff going on, don't you? What we've seen getting into Europe, Bridal, particularly with a club like Atletico Madrid, if you want to be successful in Europe, you need to be able to, at times, play on the line and deploy the dark arts, to use that term. Listen, I don't want to go full Diego Simeone ever. He's not a particularly likeable guy, and it's not the kind of personality or the type of club you'd want to become. But they know how to win games of football at that level. And do you think whoever Celtic potentially bring in for that role needs to have that wee bit of savvy, maybe that bit of experience, and maybe been round the block, whether it's Europa League or otherwise?
Absolutely no question, mate. Absolutely no question at all. I think as the Champions League progressed, after the last 3 games, Celtic were and acted a bit more streetwise than they were before. But that's why the phrase I use is streetwise, because it's exactly what it is. But that comes from experience and playing in the tournament and knowing when to go down, when to buy a foul, knowing when to, put a bit of pressure on the referee. All of these things, okay, they're not pretty. We're not saying it's the pretty part of the game. But, at big moments in the game, these teams do that. Maeda's tackle or non-tackle, he's getting sent off primarily, obviously, because the referee thinks he's raised his foot too high. But the Atletico Madrid player smashed the ball towards his own goal, deliberately initiated contact, and then everybody, manager included, surround the referee, put the pressure on. He was always getting sent off at that moment in time. As soon as that happened, he was getting sent. We don't do that. And I'm not saying we should do that, but it's a bit more like that, perhaps. Strikers knowing when to hit a defender and go down to buy us time to get up the park to stop the pressure coming back on and on and on all the time against better teams. Wingers knowing when they get contact, when to go down, to get free kicks in dangerous areas. Just wee things, okay, they're not the most honest, but unfortunately that's the game we're in, and the honesty gets us pretty much nowhere at that level. And that's, I think we got better at it, but I think, and the reason as well it happens, we're letting our players go. So we get them in, they have a year or 2 years at the most experience with us at the level, and then they're sold. Then we bring somebody else who's not got the experience. And it's just, we can't build on learning from it. And I just think that's a real crime. What's the point? We're developing players for other teams to take and let them get to a higher level. We're stagnant. If not worse, we're regressing.
That's definitely the model, isn't it? And that can't be a good model for any coach or manager to work under. You wonder how much Ange would have bought into a third season at Celtic if he was to be told that you would constantly lose your best players. Jota is absolutely, a good example of that. He is one of the main men. Now, don't get me wrong, unique situation, but it's hard to turn down the 25 million from Saudi Arabia. But generally speaking, if it wasn't Jota, it would be somebody else to balance the books in the summer past. You would lose somebody else summer coming. And that'll be the case at Celtic. You realise that you've got a special player in Matt O'Reilly, for example. O'Reilly could be gone by the end of this season. That's the reality of life at Celtic. And you wonder how appealing that is to Brendan Rodgers, the current manager, or whoever steps in, after his time. Because as a coach, all you can do is continue to work with these guys and mould them. Realise you need a number 10, realise you need a 6, a left back. Bit by bit, you piece it together. Just when the puzzle's coming together and making sense, you lose a key player. The current model just doesn't allow building, and that must be really frustrating for whoever the coach is at Celtic.
Yeah, I think it makes it nearly impossible. It really does. It makes it nearly impossible to do anything worthwhile. I think we played okay in the European games, but okay just isn't good enough. And I tried to defend it all the time, and we were close, and handballs and penalties, and whatever. But ultimately, the table is the table, and we're out with a game to go. And a group that it's so frustrating, because with an extra bit of investment and a bit of, I dare say, bravery from the club, or not learning from our mistakes, we just keep on doing it. I mean, for years we used to do our business so late that we get knocked out at the playoff. Like, it just didn't make sense as fans. Why are we waiting? Now, okay, people who are far cleverer than myself could then say, oh, we need to wait because X, Y, and Z needs to happen. Right, okay, well, but it doesn't make it acceptable. It's just not acceptable. Otherwise, what's the point? How can we argue? How can we keep arguing with, like, media, or the English media in particular, saying that we don't deserve to be in the Champions League, for example, when we're not investing? We're not trying to be in the Champions League. It's almost like, oh, we'll take our money, we'll take the ticket, and we'll enjoy the ride and we'll head home. It's just madness. That's not, as fans, that's not what we should be signing up for. And I don't think it is what we sign up for. And this kind of, I'm a bit guilty of it myself, to be fair. And I've got to put my hands up, when big players came and we applauded them off. I get that gives, a good impression of it. But it doesn't help us beat these teams. So I think we all need to look at ourselves and be a bit, I don't know, a bit more aggressive in trying to reach your targets, because I don't think the club as a whole are doing that. And some fans like myself at that time would be the same.
Yeah, it's hard not to get the impression or the feeling that for the club it's just good enough and they're happy enough to be at the Champions League, group stages. Doesn't matter if we qualify, we can come first, second, third or fourth. Doesn't matter because you've banked the, I don't know what you get now, 30, 40 million, and it's going to be even more getting into next season. The lack of ambition, or at least the perceived lack of ambition from the outside looking in, it's seriously disappointing. Just come up on screen there, you folks will see it, a donation of $20 from San Fran Celtic. San Fran's a good supporter of what we do, clearly supporting Acsom as well, so good to see that. So it seems, Bridal, there's that lack of ambition from the club, and it certainly doesn't match the fans' ambition, doesn't match Brendan Rodgers' ambition, and it's just we're in this kind of vicious cycle at this moment in time. The other frustration is, and you've touched on it, getting into Champions League stuff, we used to have the age-old thing where it's the qualifiers, what do? We can't sign somebody just yet unless we know if we're going to be Champions League or Europa, so we'll just hang about, we'll put their beat on at centre-half, all that kind of stuff. But for the last 2 seasons, we've had guaranteed Champions League. We've known that if you win the title, you're in. So you can do your spending early in the window and you can make those key purchases before you get to, before you're even drawn in the group stages. It would be the same this time around if we manage to retain the title, and that's no guarantee at this moment in time. You'll know that you're Champions League and you know there's a big prize fund or a big prize pot at the end of that. Celtic need to be more proactive. We can't do this passive maybe stuff. We signed 9 maybes in the summer, and it's just not acceptable. Bridal, let's get back on track with the 3 players. We've obviously we're still hurting from yesterday. The emotions are running high, but we've covered that enforcer position, that number 6. So you've gone for Victor Wanyama in there, and I don't think a lot of folk would argue, and you'd be delighted if you brought somebody of that nature in January or otherwise. Where else do you feel is key to strength, and what would be area number 2 for you?
It's got to be the left back. It has to be the left back. Primarily because of the way Rodgers plays. He's kind of always had a left winger who's right-footed. So Scott Sinclair was that for a good number of years under Brendan in the first tenure. Now, that's okay if the left back is able to offer the width, outside of that person. So that creates, a real problem for the defending team, because the player can tuck inside and get a shot away, or if you've got good quality on the fullback position doing overlaps all the time, then that would be great. There's also the aspect, if they get the ball out wide, they need to be able to beat a player. Their left back, I think, the way we play, they need to stand a player up and get a touch and get out their feet and get it across and get across into the box, especially in Scotland domestically, because of how the teams play. They'll sit in with their 2 banks of 4 and sometimes more than that. But Greg Taylor, unfortunately, just doesn't have it in his locker. There's nothing personal against the guy. It's not that. It's just I think he works hard. I think he's full of endeavour. He's like the wee guy. He's the wee man syndrome. He's getting niggling folks' ankles and he gets involved. I think he tries to be honest in his game. But as soon as there's a dip of confidence for him, because I felt like he was playing out of his skin for Ange at times, and he was going way beyond the ceiling that I thought he would be at. Smashed through it, in fact, quite quickly, and then it's regressed right the way back, and it's wholly down to the way that the manager's now asking the team to play, and his role's now changed so much. Yeah. There's a demand on him to do that, and he just can't. He can't do it. He doesn't have the speed or the power or the kind of athleticism to do it. He works hard. I've no question about his honesty, but quite frankly, every single fan, I think, we all can't be wrong. We all cannot be wrong.
And you're spot on. And it's no vendetta against a player who's a very honest player. First and foremost, he gives his absolute everything every time he pulls on a shirt. But that's not enough. We'd all do it. If you or I were playing Bridal, we'd give everything. We'd be absolutely useless, or you would at least. But it's just not enough to want to play and have that desire. You need to have the quality and the ability to go with it. And Greg Taylor, he's been unfortunate in the change of system because Ange ball clearly suited him. But what you had in the last 2 years under Ange was your inverted fullbacks. So whether it's Taylor on the left and Alistair Johnson on the right, and allowed your wingers to be high and wide. So, Jota, Maeda, Abada, whatever, they would be high and wide with the purpose of getting to the byline and getting across for Kyogo. Now we've flipped that model on its head under Brendan Rodgers. Your fullbacks are more traditional, more orthodox fullbacks, having to bomb up and down, and your wingers are inverting. How often do you see Louis Palmer tuck in every time he gets it? He's got no desire to get to the byline. He does it on the odd occasion. He done it against Aberdeen when he clipped it over for Yang's header. He's done it once or twice in other games. But generally speaking, almost every time Louis Palmer gets the ball, and I'm a big fan, by the way. I think he's a talent, but he has immediate responses to cut inside. Same on the right, whether it's, I don't know who we got there, Mikey Johnson, Yang, James Forrest, whoever it might be at this moment in time. There's no great desire to get to the byline like an old-fashioned winger. They're coming inside to a very busy, congested area, and I think we're just finding it so hard to break down. So it is what it is. It's where we're at right now, and I don't know if Rodgers is going to change that anytime soon. So while the system is the system, we need somebody more suitable at left back. It's not working for Greg Taylor. He doesn't have the physicality or the attributes to do it. I've certainly got a guy in my head. I'm pretty sure you'll be thinking the same guy that would be the absolute dream for Celtic at this moment in time to slot in there. So who would your first choice left back be?
Kieran Tierney. It'd have
All
to be
day
Kieran.
long.
It has to be. I mean, if we look back as kind of highlights, really feel like in big games as well. I mean, Champions League games. Not a lot of players outdone him. You know, and he's playing essentially with the kind of luxury player in front of him as well. Remember, that's the kind of player who tucks in the Scott Sinclairs of the world or whatever. And right now, having to get to the byline, like exactly what you said there, it touches on and takes us part of that, and that is Kyogo. Now, there's an argument about why Kyogo's not scoring the goals. I know I played centre forward, but I've got a rough idea that I know if I make my move sharper than a defender, I'll score more goals. Now, Mikey Johnson tucks inside, fakes the cross, fakes the cross, fakes the cross, fakes the cross. The striker, Kyogo's making moves like that constantly all the time. And eventually the ball goes into the box. The defender's got the leap on him. In fact, doesn't need a leap on him. He's so small. And on the left-hand side, we don't get to the byline because we've got a right-footed player tucking in like Palmer. It just doesn't suit Kyogo. It pure and simply doesn't suit. Whereas under Ange, like you said, high and wide, what was Abada's best attribute? He gets crosses in really, really early. Maeda's the same on the other side, whipping it across really low. And I don't know what percentage of Kyogo's goals were scored with goals from the front post or runs to the front post across the ground from the wingers. I don't know how many he scored this year. Perhaps I should have had my stats ready for this podcast, but like it just doesn't happen now, and it is absolutely music to the ears of a team like Mirren or Kilmarnock or Motherwell to go show him inside, and Palmer, similar to players who I think failed or helped Celtic fail, in like Elyounoussi and that type of player, Christie, constantly going into the traffic. And it makes it, and then not only does it affect Kyogo's game, but affects the guys like O'Reilly, McGregor, who's then their space is now being congested because players keep tucking inside all the time. And if you combine that with a Greg Taylor as opposed to the Kieran Tierney on the left-hand side, I mean, even if Greg Taylor does get to the byline, if we're going to be honest, does he have the quality to cross the ball well? He's not got great delivery. It's just his attributes aren't there. Whereas Tierney's attributes, can beat a guy 1-to-1. He can get up and down that left-hand side. He's a very good defender as well. His only issue is injuries and getting him playing. He played a lot of games for us at a young age, and it's probably not helped him. Actually, probably played when I'm going to guess he's played when he probably shouldn't have played.
Yeah.
Because he had the desire. But if we're getting him as we had him before, then that's exactly who I would put in there.
Yeah, I'll go back to KT in just a second, but you talked about guys like Louis Palmer, Elyounoussi, Haksabanovic is the same.
Yep.
Interestingly, you might have heard Brendan Rodgers using the term in a recent press conference, wide forwards, not wingers, wide forwards, right? And for that, I think he means Louis Palmer for me isn't a winger. Winger for me, maybe I'm showing my age or traditional when it comes to wingers. Wingers should get the ball, beat the fullback, get to the byline, fire it across the box. And that's it. That is your primary objective. Now you've got these wide forwards and their job is to be creative in the final third, whether it might be by getting to the byline, it might be by cutting inside, it might be by exchanging a 1-2 with a Kyogo or whatever, but it's not now solely about getting to the byline. And I think, I don't know, there's a reason why teams have played with wingers for so long, and I don't think there's much wrong with that model. But in terms of, if you're looking for a guy to be your bombing, left back, bombing up and down the park, KT would be the dream for Celtic right now. A fit and firing KT, because he's just got that power, that pace and energy, and he does it equally effectively at both sides of the park. He can get to the byline and put in quality Likewise, he can do his job defensively. Nobody bullies Kieran Tierney. He is a powerful boy. He's clearly worked hard on himself. Strong, physical, aggressive. Into the bargain, he absolutely knows what it's all about to be at Celtic, and he would just be the perfect signing at this moment in time. And you know, the thing is, it wasn't as much as a fantasy as it might sound now. It was a possibility in the summer. It was certainly talked about, and it was debated, and we spoke about it in the show. Different folk considered it. I know his wages would always be a blocker, but there's always ways to make these deals happen. But I do remember some folks saying, nah, that wouldn't be the right move for me. Tierney wouldn't be the man. Yeah, what's the point in bringing a guy in on loan just for him to leave again after a year? I would bite your hand off to have Kieran Tierney here right now at this moment in time, because he's exactly what Celtic need, Brido. I mentioned scruff of the neckers. We don't have, I was going to say we don't have many. I don't know if we've got any. Is Callum McGregor a real natural scruff of the neck kind of guy in the way that Bruni was? I don't think so, and that's no slight on him. It's just not his thing. Carter Vickers is a leader, but he's not a scruff of the neck kind of guy. Joe Hart the same, 75 caps for England. He's not a scruff of the neck. Kieran Tierney is. If you're shirking your responsibility, if you're giving anything less than 100%, Kieran Tierney would be the first guy to let you know. And I think Celtic are begging for a guy like this at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's understood when he left and why he left. I mean, it's just the nature of the game. But I knew it was going to be very, very, very difficult to replace. Very difficult. We had a player of a certain level for a few years anyway, and to go and get that player or that level of player, we just didn't have the money to spend on that at that time. Again, that puts a ceiling on where the club can go and what our realistic targets can be. But it's only one position, but to me, it really, really affects the team. It really does, and it's like I try not to. I really tried not to focus so much on it, but fullbacks, the modern day fullbacks, and the way that Celtic play, Alistair Johnson and Greg Taylor. I mean, I don't know what the touches per game, but they must be some of the highest amount of touches. Have to be, because of how we play. So it's such an important role. And this just playing the ball back, you know, it's the same as a kind of coward's pass, you know, like be brave and play the pass through the lines and find your midfielder or find your striker. To me, fullback's one of the easiest positions. You've got about 7 options every time you get the ball. You can play up the line, you can find a forward, you can play it short, you can play back, you can play it inside to a defender or a midfielder. And there's nobody behind you. You know, so like it should be a high percentage of completed passes. I don't think Greg Taylor's got that. Alongside all the other stuff that we mentioned there. So it's trying to put kind of like facts onto my opinion, if you like. As to why I think it needs to be replaced.
You mentioned they've got kind of 7 or so options as a left back. You forgot mystery option 8, slice the ball out the park, which is one that we've seen all too often recently. Listen, KT is the obvious choice. I'm not seriously going to debate it. I think he would be the number one absolutely for Celtic if it was a possibility. There are other guys that you might want to consider over the years. Lee Naylor that's been mentioned, Mo Kamara, Danny Fox, and our old friend Bolly Bolingoli, who interestingly was brought in to replace Greg Taylor, which tells you how long we've been trying to find a solution in that part of the park as well. Any of those guys jump out for any reason, Bridle?
No, they certainly don't, mate. The reasons as to why I'm glad they're not there. I mean, the Bolingoli during COVID, I mean, geez, just epitomised everything that was going on at the time when he jumps on a plane to go to Spain to see his girlfriend. But he's a guy who was, when he first came in, was a very, very good player for us. Then he got that bad injury, and I don't think he ever recovered properly from it. But again, he was a player when he first came. He did burst onto the scene. But nah, to me, it's none of I've gave us what Kieran has gave us, and it was still a relatively short period of time that he was with us. So he's made his impact, and hopefully, I would love it if we got him back fit. That is a fit Kieran Tierney.
Yeah. One guy who's worth just a very brief chat about just now, Bridle, is young Mitchell Frame. Makes his Celtic debut, which was also his Champions League debut on Wednesday night against Feyenoord. Came in the last, 15, 17 minutes. Done himself no harm at all. Played his part in getting a really important one for Celtic. You then have that situation where, despite the fact that he'll have been oozing confidence and high as a kite after that. He's then pitched out of the squad for the weekend, but Bernabe comes into the squad for the weekend. Now, Bernabe's been nowhere near it, and listen, he has no future at Celtic. He's just shown, he said, ample opportunity now to show he's got something to offer, and the guy just doesn't have it. And Celtic are going to have to cut their losses. What do we spend? 3.75 million on him? You'll just need to accept a cut price deal and off he'll move. And with that in mind, and with guys like Mitchell Frame potentially being the future, why did he not have that place on the bench on Saturday? He wouldn't have been too fatigued. He only played, as I say, 15 odd minutes. He'll have been excited, energised, ready to go. I don't understand that. And as I say, I'm very generally speaking a huge fan of Brendan Rodgers, but it doesn't mean that he shouldn't be questioned for certain decisions. Of course he should. But I couldn't quite get my head around that one. And if Celtic were needing to bring on a left back on Saturday, which they definitely did at one point, why was it not Mitchell Frame?
Honestly, that at that moment of just a terrible, terrible, terrible day for us was almost like the final act that you just go, what is going on? Genuinely, I'm a glass half full person. The happy clapper. That's what I am. I'm the happy clapper. But it makes no sense. It makes no sense on a personality level. It makes no sense on even a business level for the future. He's not part of our future plans. It makes no sense in the fact exactly what you said to that young boy. He should be thinking, I'm second in command to Greg Taylor. And if Greg gets injured, I'll get my chance. That's where Tierney got his chance when Izagiri got injured. And he came in, and quite quickly we all realised, geez, this is some player, and they developed and they developed and they developed. How are we? I mentioned it in the podcast after the Feyenoord game when we did a comparison with Copenhagen as well. How can we possibly bring through Scottish players or young players if we don't play them? That was a perfect opportunity to have that young boy on the bench to come on. We could have been 2 up, put him on. At that time we were 2-0 down, but ultimately we had to put him on as well, 2-0 down, because it just didn't look like anything was happening. And he showed in the game. I know he played further forward against Feyenoord, to be fair, but he got the ball across the box, and he tried to get 1 or 2 or 3 corners by trying to get to the byline and getting the ball across. It makes them defend. And ultimately, we looked a better team when he played for that 15-20 minutes. And it left us all kind of going, you know what, maybe the future is pretty good with these young players. And then he doesn't play them. It doesn't make any sense. And Bernabe, even playing him, he played him in a different position. He played him further forward. It's just madness. And with the exception of putting the ball in for Giakoumakis against St Johnstone away from home last year, the year before, that was last year, Bernabe's offered absolutely nothing. And he didn't deserve to be on the park, and he didn't deserve to be on the strip. But that young boy did. And it makes, I really, really, honestly, I think Brendan Rodgers is a really good manager. But that was a sign that I couldn't defend. There's nothing to defend that. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, do you know, I couldn't get my head around it at all, and it felt like a very un-Brendan Rodgers-like decision, the one to throw on Bernabe, because he's a smart guy, he's an experienced coach, and I like to think that he generally thinks long and hard about any decisions he makes. Now, in the heat of a game, in the heat of battle, sometimes you need to make calls at short notice, but at no point, listen, he's spent enough time now with Bernabe to know what he's all about, and at no point can he have thought, it's not happening for Louis Palmer on the left wing today. I know what I'll do. Give the young Argentinian boy a shout. We'll throw him up there and we'll see what happens. It felt like such a non-Rodgers decision and such a roll of the dice that it was never going to work, was it? And I think it lasted less than 10 minutes as an experiment. And then he eventually moved him back to left back. And listen, he was no better there either. He's just not good enough. He's just yet another failing by Celtic in the transfer market. Anyway, to move on from left back. So we've got KT in there. We've now got Victor Wanyama, the enforcer in midfield. What's the last position that we need to replace?
I think it has to be the goalkeeper. I know there's other positions, but with a full squad and full fit squad, I think the other positions aren't as bad. Winger would be an obvious one, but for me, I think the goalkeeping position is always understated. People don't, until you only know the goalkeeper position needs to be fixed when it goes wrong. Like You'll know you need a new goalkeeper, but it's like, wait a minute, you should be saving that. Now, that free kick that was scored yesterday was almost a carbon copy of Lee Griffiths' win for Scotland against Joe Hart for England. So either Joe can't get down, or it was never a free kick, by the way, but he's got to save it. And there's other times as well, like, to me, it's getting to a stage now, it's became a real issue. He came out and punched a ball, was it yesterday? I'm getting my games all mixed up. What do you do? Just catch the ball. Just catch the ball. I look across at the other team that we're competing against for the league, and Rangers have got a goalkeeper in Jack Butland who catches the ball. He comes out, he takes command, and it takes a bit of bravery, and a bit of desire. Perhaps he's at a stage in his career where, I'm not going to call that into question because he's been a kind of consummate pro, to be fair, but it's just not doing it for us anymore. And I just think in big moments, he does it from time to time. I know that. It's not all bad, but for me, that's the position that has to be, and it sets your confidence levels for your back four as well. If you've got a strong goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper I picked, I think the players that played with that goalkeeper would all say the same. It's like they always stood a chance, no matter who they were playing against. They always stood a chance because he was able to do it in those big moments pretty much all of the time.
For Joe Hart, Bridie, before I get your choice, for Joe Hart, for me, it's his confidence and his decision making have gone. They've been called into question. I think he's been brilliant for Celtic. He was the right fit at the right time, but I think it's now reaching a natural end. He should move on. His deal expires at the end of the season. He should move on at that point with everybody's best wishes. There's chat about, should we offer him a deal as a goalie coach or something like that? Absolutely. If you can keep the 75 times capped England goalie around, then go for it. Go for broke. But in terms of playing games of football, he shouldn't last beyond the summer coming. Some want him replaced even sooner. I'm not convinced that we have to replace him sooner. I think he's good enough, hopefully good enough to see us through at the end of the season. But I just think you're right. There's a one last night or yesterday afternoon where he should just come out and catch it. He was under no real pressure from Lawrence Shankland. Shankland didn't even jump, and Hearts panicked and half punched it away, certainly not cleared the danger, and all of a sudden you're back under pressure. And it's things like that. I don't think his shot stopping's ever been in question. He made a couple of big stops during the week against Feyenoord, some really smart stops from Jimenez and others. As a shot stopper, the bread and butter stuff in that area is fine, but the confidence to come out and command your box, he's so rooted to his line for corners and set pieces, it's untrue, and it's starting to cost us. That's the thing. And goalies, like anybody, you talk about Greg Taylor, you can talk about Kyogo, you can talk about whoever. Goalies are definitely confidence players as well, and they're either up or down. And Joe Hart is on the down at this moment in time. And the bigger frustration from a Celtic point of view is, again, due to the recruitment, we don't have a viable alternative. There's nobody decent waiting in the wings. With all respect, it's never Scott Bain. It might have been Siegrist at one point, but I don't know what he's doing behind the scenes, but it's clearly not enough either. And there's no genuine competition for the goal at this moment. So he knows that despite his failings and despite the errors that he's making, he's going to start the very next game. And that's never a healthy position for Celtic to be in, is it?
No, it's not. And we've done podcasts over the last couple of years or whatever, and at some stage there was competition for a lot of the places. There was real competition. And the competition makes a player honest. It makes them, if their confidence is affected, they find a way to get through it. They don't feel sorry for themselves because they'll realise they'll be out the team. It's just been on for too long, the goalkeeping thing. Joe Hart, you're absolutely spot on, was the right person for the job at the time. That was proven with the success we got. The Barkas scenario, obviously, was just a bit of a disaster. But so Celtic did spend the money on the goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. We're happy to spend the money, £6 million or something, wasn't it, for Barkas?
Yeah.
About that. So they want to spend the money, but then that opens up another problem: is like, who picked them? Who signed off the £6 million for a guy? And I know COVID, and I know he's in a hotel room on his own, and I know all of that. It does affect his mental state and whatever. But that's your job to go back down the Roy Keane thing of being a goalkeeper. That is your job. Find a way of getting over it, get help and support if you need it. But and then obviously the situation with Joe just now, it's just like you're waiting for something to go wrong all the time. And so our confidence is affected, which you hear in the stand. You hear, oh no, again, and oh, what's he doing now? Like, that is not what you want for your goalkeeper. I dare say your back four and team think the same at times.
Do you know, just to look at the Barkas situation very quickly, when Celtic are scouting a player for any position, it's one thing seeing that he's got the traits and attributes you're looking for from that position. Say it's a goalkeeper, how's his handling, how is he with the ball at his feet, crosses, all those, whatever the parameters are that you measure a goal against. And clearly they've scouted Barkas and thought, he can do all of this. I think he'd done it at Champions League level for AEK Athens and, capped for Greece and whatever else. So they've seen that he's got the ability to do that. But is that ability enough at Celtic, Bridal? Or do you need to find out where a guy is mentally? Does he have the strength to come to the hotbed that is Scottish football, and particularly the west of Scotland, and play in front of maybe sometimes an overly demanding crowd, but that's just life at Celtic. That's how it goes for all of us. The weight of expectation is huge. So it's not good enough just to be a good goalie or a good left back or a good striker or whatever. You need to have that mental fortitude, that strength of character. And this is why I think Ange was so successful with his early signings, because he got very hands-on, he got very personal with it. He spoke often about making the phone call. So Celtic were trying to get guys and deals over the line, and often the player would come in and say, yep, I spoke to the manager and that's what convinced me. And I think there's guys that Ange spoke to who absolutely came to Celtic based on what he had to say. There's also guys that Ange will have spoke to that he then decided weren't right for Celtic based on what the potential signing had to say. He'll have got an impression. He'll have worked out what their drivers were, what motivates you as an individual, as a footballer, and made sure that he was of the right temperament to come and play for Celtic Football Club. And I think that homework wasn't done with Barkas, because he's actually left Celtic and gone on to be a bit of a success at Utrecht, hasn't he? People will remind us, you see it on Twitter, you see the Barkas picking up man of the match again, wonder saves, keeping his team in it, over there in the Eredivisie. He's clearly a good goalkeeper, but that's not enough for Celtic. And you can apply that to any position, can't you? Across the board. You need to have something just a wee bit more about you than just the ability.
Yeah, without doubt. We've seen it. I remember there's one actually in particular, and it's the jersey's too heavy for these players sometimes. And I think one of the ones that stuck out was Gary Mackay-Steven. I remember him at Dundee United, and I thought he was a phenomenal young player. And when we signed him and Armstrong at the same time, I thought, something, it goes back to what we said about Scottish players and whatever, getting them and having some kind of network of Scottish players in the club. And it just didn't work for the boy. He just couldn't cope with that demand and that pressure. And I dare say that's quite difficult to find, or find out. It's a talent in itself to know that a player has the mental capacity and mental strength to cope with what Celtic and what us as fans and our demands are, like we're seeing now. Look at this, it was like at the stadium yesterday. It's like that because we have levels, we have standards that we expect. And unfortunately, when players don't have that or don't do that, they shouldn't last very long. The problem we've got is I think we've given players a lot longer than they should have been given. And that leads us to this massive squad of players that just we know are not going to impact the starting 11 or starting 14, 15 kind of squad, match day squads. They're not going to impact it positively enough to deserve to be there. And that's on the people picking them or the people not being able to get rid of them as well. So Rodgers has been left with a bit of rubbish. Ange wasn't, perfect in that regard either. There was a lot of failures in that, but perhaps he was in a position to identify that quicker and didn't, didn't throw them on with 15 minutes to go in a different position like he did with Burnaby. So, but yeah, the goalkeeper, Barkas,
yeah. Maybe there was a situation, Bridal, where Ange was allowed to make the international phone calls to Japan and whatever else, and that was fine at the time. Now they've tightened the purse strings, and Brenda isn't getting to make those expensive outgoing calls, and that could be part of the reason. Listen, conscious of time, so looking for your ex-Celt to be that goalkeeper. For me, it would be one or two. Is it Fraser Forster or is it Arthur Boric? Who would it be?
Fraser Forster for me. Big moments, big games over the periods that he was with us. That cup final, Boric was brilliant. I mean, if you're picking like a Maverick 11, he's like just captain. Do you know what I mean? But for me, it has to be Fraser Forster. And that again, if you put that in there with a good solid partnership. Carter Vickers with Wanyama, McGregor, bit of touchy class with Riley, Hatate, and Kyogo, who we know is a prolific goal scorer on the most part. I think your spine of your team's sorted, whereas at the minute I just feel it's quite weak.
Yeah, and it's not just the goalie doing his own job, and you think of Foster in that final, the 2019 League Cup final, almost single-handedly led Celtic to the cup that day. That save against Lazio away, where he just flashes across the goals into the top, it's some phenomenal moments, but a big, powerful, imposing character, and that's what I mentioned earlier in the piece, didn't I? Celtic need that physicality across the board, and from a goalkeeping sense, someone that will come out and command his whole area. But it's also the added plus of having someone like that, as you rightly say, Brido, is the confidence it gives your back four. If you're Carter Vickers in front of that, even if you're Greg Taylor, Alistair Johnson, Liam Scales at this moment in time, you've got the confidence that, well, first of all, you can give it back to him and he's going to keep possession, but also that if you do make a mistake for whatever reason, he's going to be the guy that's going to at least give you a chance of getting away with it. And at the moment, you just don't know how that's going to play out. And as I said, generally speaking, I'll speak positively about Joe Hart's time at Celtic, but he doesn't have the presence. He lacks the presence that a Fraser Forster or somebody like him certainly had at Celtic.
Yeah, and having that goalkeeping spot with a goalkeeper like what Forster done for us, Boric, we've seen goalkeepers in Scotland for different clubs, actually, how important they became. And we're actually seeing it with, again, with the Rangers team, with Jack Butland, their fans singing his name and stuff like that. It tells you what they think of him in that position, and it makes a massive difference to a team. So, unfortunately for us at the minute, that's what he's helping them steady that their ship. But for us, it's just a bit shaky. It's shaky every game, and us being nervous, it does transfer onto the pitch, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I say, conscious of time, so just to confirm, we could have covered any number of positions at this moment in time and any number of, great Celtic players from the past. We've kept it fairly modern, haven't we? Fairly recent players. I thought you might have thrown Jimmy McGrory up top, for example, but you've gone against that. But I don't think anyone could argue with a Fraser Forster, a Kieran Tierney and a Victor Wanyama. And it is telling, actually, that all three of them have that physicality that I mentioned. It's clear that that's an issue at this, moment in time for this Celtic team. But I think we'd bite your hand off for three guys of that nature. And who knows? I mean, I'd be amazed if it happened, but who knows what Celtic will pull out the bag in the January window or beyond. But I know it's been great chatting about that. So just any final comments, whether it's about your selections or Celtic in general at this moment in time as we get ready to jump off?
It's obviously not great at the minute, just based on, I've said this phrase a few times, there's a way to win football games with style and respect, whatever else you want to throw in, but there's also a way to lose games. You can't win every single game. You're not going to not lose football games, but to lose with a kind of whimper, if you like, with no at home, with no real expectation to win after we went 2-0 down, it just wasn't happening. That is a real concern. The journey up from it'll be okay, we're fine, we've got a good manager, to sack the board, get the manager out and all that, and replace every single player we've got, within that parameter. I'm probably reaching that halfway stage at the minute where I'm thinking, what is it that needs to happen? People keep talking about January. We need to get to January 1st, and we've got every game's massive now. We've put ourselves in that position, unfortunately. And I think we do lack aggression, we do lack physicality, and I think we've just taken our eye off the ball. We're in a position of strength for a treble-winning team, and we've taken our eye off the ball. We've not built on that. We've not removed the stuff that wasn't so good and replaced it with stuff that, okay, every transfer's a risk. We know that. They don't always work out, and throwing money at it doesn't solve it either. But at least let us see that we're seeing a different level of transfer being made, and not, Telio, all right, one of the best young Australian players, right, okay, great, Yang, South Korean Player of the Year, like these players, just go in there and saying, right, okay, we can get them, no problem with that, but let's look at, almost sure bets or surer bets than the ones we're getting, because we're all kind of sick of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some issues a lot of issues actually to be resolved at Celtic Park at this moment in time. But if we can get a Fraser Forster, a KT type, and a Wanyama, we'll be in a lot better place. Brido, thanks as always for joining. It's always good to chat. Thanks to Paul, John, and the team at Acsom for having us on this weekend. Delighted always to support the charities. And please do continue to support wee Jamie Tierney with any contributions you can make. And finally, a big thanks to me for everyone that tuned in. We'll see you again soon.